Hello and welcome everyone to yet another live Q&A by Tinnitus Quest. It's probably our most exciting one yet because we have awarded our very first research grant and we're going to be talking all about that today. I'm joined by my co-executive board member and co-founder Sven. Dirk de Ridder should also be joining, but he's not here yet, so we will see. We also have Jack Rubinacci, our PR manager here, and Marco Vesela, who's handling all the tech stuff behind the scenes. So we're here to answer any questions you might have about our new research grant, or really any questions that you want to ask us in general. We're happy to answer them. You can already start submitting your questions now. There's a box called Q&A that should be visible somewhere on your screen. You can type questions there. There's also a chat box. I see people have been very active in the chat already, so that's just for you guys to talk to each other or make general comments. But if you want us to answer your question, you have to put it in the Q&A box. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you had a nice quiet time with family and friends over the holidays. I hope your New Year's celebrations weren't too loud. That depends on where you live. I know in some cities it can get extremely loud and you need hearing protection. So I hope it wasn't too much. But yeah, Happy New Year to everyone and glad to see you all here today. I'm going to kick it off with a little poll just to get you guys engaged. Let's see. Oh yeah, it says launching. And I see Dirk has joined as well. Thank you, Dirk. If you're able to pull up the background, you just click on the arrow next to the video and pull up the background. And I'm putting the poll up on stage. You should all be able to vote right now on this poll, which says how much confidence do you have that better solutions for tinnitus will be available in the next 10 years. That's, of course, a little bit of a random time frame, but I'm very curious to see what people think about this, and we'll give it another minute or so to let people vote. We have 38 votes. Yeah, most people are sort of falling in the middle, which is, I guess to be expected. Okay. Well, we could let that vote just tick on if more people want to vote, but as you guys can see, the vast majority has some confidence that there will be solutions. It's nice to see that 8% of people have 100% confidence. That's pretty cool. 3% of people no confidence at all, which is quite sad. It's an understandable sentiment, but of course something that we very much hope to change. Okay, I'm gonna present a couple of slides just to set the stage here, because of course I don't know who's joining, if you guys are familiar with us or not. I think it's important to have a little bit of background about this grant that we've awarded. And again, just put your questions in the Q&A box while I'm talking. So yeah, I think it's important to kind of recall why and how Tinnitus Quest was founded. It was essentially founded by a group of tinnitus sufferers. So myself and Sven and Marco Vesela. I guess born from a sense of, frustration with the lack of progress in tinnitus research and seeking to really accelerate the quest for better solutions. We were very much aware, like all of us had been sort of in the tinnitus space, if you will, for years. Marco founded the Tinnitus Talk Support Forum in 2011 and has been running that on a volunteer basis ever since. I had been involved with Tinnitus Talk also as a volunteer since 2018, I think. And then we started the Tinnitus Talk podcast. And Sven had been funding tinnitus research for a couple of years already, like on an individual basis. And we were all very much aware, like tinnitus is a very serious problem for a significant number of people. The existing therapies are just not sufficient. There's just not enough money going into research, but even the research that is happening, there's not enough like exploratory research going on into new treatments. and there's real barriers between patients and researchers, like there's a disconnect. And so those were all things that we wanted to solve, and we felt no one was really addressing those issues. So as I said, we're a very young organization. We're actually less than 18 months old. We were formally established in July 2024 in Germany. Oh, did I go off stage now? Can you guys still hear me? Yeah, just checking. And yeah, since then we've launched a social media website. We started doing these kinds of Q&As. We also established ourselves in the US as a 501c3. We attracted Dan Polly from Harvard as the head of our innovation board, which is kind of the body that defines the framework for our grants program. I presented at the TRI conference, which is the biggest tinnitus research conference. We launched our grants program last summer. And then this autumn, we did a very cool in-person research event where we got, I think it was 23 or so people together, some of the top researchers in the field, but also research funders and patient organizations for intensive brainstorming and discussion about, how to overcome the obstacles in tinnitus research and move forward together more quickly. And it was really a breath of fresh air compared to some of the academic conferences I've been to, much more engaging. And if you want to read about that, just go to our website under the research tab. There's a long report about the tinnitus hackathon. And if you're really into the research, you should absolutely read that. And then, of course, our most recent milestone is awarding our first grant. So a little bit about our grants program. It was really meant specifically for exploratory testing of new treatments that could have the potential to silence tinnitus. That's a very narrow focus that we really chose very specifically because that's where we felt there's a gap and we can have the most impact. Even with relatively modest funding, you could have significant impact there. We received 29 applications, which was, I would say, very encouraging. We initially planned to award 3 grants, ended up awarding 1. That's certainly something we can talk about more if you want, and feel free to ask questions about that. So we currently have almost $500,000 USD in our research fund. So half of that is now allocated to this winning research project. The other half remains there, and we will hope to open up for our next round of research funding rather soon early in the year 2026, so that we can get other projects up and running sooner rather than later. So a little bit about the winning project. It's a study led by investigators at the University of Oxford. The principal investigator, whose face you see here on the slide, is called Dr. Robin Cleveland. He's a biomedical engineer, and he and his team will be evaluating whether non-invasive transcranial ultrasound stimulation can reduce tinnitus loudness by targeting deep brain structures. We will have a separate live Q&A with Robin and also Will Sedley, who's an advisor to that project, on the 17th of January. So I would encourage you all to register for that one as well. And there we really have a chance to go very deep into the project itself. You just go to our website under events. You can register there. Even if you cannot make the actual event, it's good to register because then you get a chance to watch the replay as soon as the event concludes, and you don't have to wait a couple of weeks for us to publish the final video. Just a few words outside of research, because we do more than just award research grants. We do a lot in terms of public outreach. Again, we felt like there's really this disconnect between the research community and the patient community, so we want to foster that connection. That's why we do live Q&As like this. We've done already 7 or 8 of them in the past that you can find on our website. We've also published a lot of videos featuring artists and patients talking about their experiences with tinnitus. We're really building a following on Instagram and other social media platforms, and that's important for fundraising. Of course, it allows us to raise more money for research, but also, again, to educate people about the research that's going on. And most notably, we had William Shatner, of course, promoting, talking about his experience with tinnitus and promoting Tinnitus Quest, and that video was viewed over 1 million times on Instagram alone, so probably millions of times in total. Yeah, that concludes my slides. I will just remove these from the screen and just invite the other speakers to the stage. And I'm going to start by asking Sven, as soon as Marco pulls him on stage. Yeah. Sven, I haven't talked much about the whole process of how we evaluated these grants, etc. Could you just talk a bit about how you experienced that and why we set it up the way that we did?
Yeah, I think we tried to set up a process that gives us a broad perspective on the project, because the project applications we received were coming from very, very different regions. And since Tinnitus Quest was able to attract specialists from different fields that work on tinnitus, it was quite interesting to see how the different specialists in their field evaluated the applications, and especially how, and also different clinicians and lab researchers viewed the application process. So we tried to find a group that was led by Dan Pauly to evaluate the applications, and we tried to be very strict on the application, on the quality of the applications. And what happened during the review process was that actually a lot of projects dropped out because different participants in Tinnitus Quest on the research side already tried this kind of project, but it was never published because it was a failure. So it was very important that we had different people looking at the project. And this is why also applications that seemed to be interesting in the first part of the review process dropped out in the second one. And I think this is also an explanation why we ended up with one grant rather than the 3 we set as a goal, because Tinnitus Quest wants to stay in a very strict and rigorous process, that we only fund projects that are new to the field, that are somewhat related to our high-risk, high-gain strategy. And I think bringing all of this together was the main target.
Yeah, thank you, Sven. Yeah, and I think something that we also really tried to do in this process is kind of keep the burden for the researchers quite low, right? Because often when they have to write funding applications, they have to fill in like a 25-page form in the first round. We really kept that like first application very light. And then the second round was talking to people in person in a video call. And so we made our decisions based on that and kept the process quite light for the researchers. I'd like to invite Dirk to the stage to talk a little bit about his experience with the grant evaluation process. Dirk, was there anything that kind of stood out from a scientific perspective in terms of, the topics that were submitted, the ideas that people had?
Hi, good day, everybody. Yes, as a neurosurgeon, I'm very interested, of course, in neuromodulation approaches, and the winning grant is related to neuromodulation. And why is it important? Because neuromodulation has been used for a long time in an attempt to treat tinnitus, both electrical stimulation via implanted electrodes, but also transcranially. Also, magnetic stimulation has been tried, but there is newer forms of neuromodulation, such as photobiomodulation, where you don't use electricity or magnetic stimuli, but light, or ultrasound. The benefit of ultrasound, which is the main application of the grant that got the funding, is ultrasound. And the benefit of ultrasound is that you can go deep into the brain directly. And so targets that were previously inaccessible by electrical or magnetic stimuli, at least directly, can be reached by ultrasound, and this is what is very relevant and novel in this approach. Now, from a practical point of view, the question that people might have is, so will this then lead to a new treatment that will be available next year? Probably not, because there is one thing to know whether it has a beneficial effect or not, and the other is to translate that to something that is commercially available to people with tinnitus. But you first have to take the first step, which is to see whether this really novel approach can make a difference. And this is where the beauty of the neuromodulation approach with ultrasound is really very good. Now, in order to do so, considering that there is no really commercially available product available, you need a highly specialized engineering center in combination with a very good tinnitus clinical center. And this is what this grant has. They have both components, both the clinicians as well as the engineers, which is an essential requirement. And this is fairly unique in that most tinnitus research centers are capable of using traditional approaches like magnetic or electrical stimulation, but are clearly not capable yet, because there is no commercially available device to really develop this kind of novel approach. So I think it's a very deserved grant. And of course, we all hope that this direct targeting of deeper structures in the brain that we know are at least involved in the generation of tinnitus might lead to a breakthrough, in the sense that using this new approach and the new targets give a beautiful opportunity to try and silence tinnitus.
Yeah, I think that's a very good introduction to this project and why we selected it. I see that there are quite a few questions about transcranial ultrasound stimulation and the project. So I will let's just start pulling up people's questions and answering them. Is transcranial ultrasound stimulation used for other chronic health conditions? Is there any preliminary research suggesting efficacy for tinnitus? And I will direct this one first of all to Dirk.
That's a very good question. Actually, there's two kinds of transcranial ultrasound stimulation. There is transcranial pulsed ultrasound, which is more like the ultrasound that's used to treat kidney stones and problems in joints. This approach is commercially available and is only being used for Alzheimer's disease. Also, this new technique has not been used yet for tinnitus, but the second ultrasound approach is more akin to electrical stimulation, but then with sound. So it doesn't come in short bouts or short bursts, but is a more continuous stimulation for which we understand better its mechanism of action. The problem with the pulse ultrasound is that we do not really understand very well what it does, what makes it very difficult to make predictions about where to target, how to target. Is it inhibitory? Is it excitatory? As I mentioned, there is no commercially available device yet, so there is no other treatments for which it is routinely used. Now, some preliminary research, especially in addiction, has shown very powerful and long-lasting effects with this with a similar device, suggesting that at least we can modulate targets for a longer time of at least a week, and in addiction even for a longer time. So if the question is, do we have very strong evidence from other pathologies that will certainly work? No, but we do have preliminary advice from other research that it can certainly influence deeper structures, because the Ackermans was also a target of the addiction studies that has a lasting effect on the addiction. So the Ackermans is one of the targets also involved in the tinnitus trial that will be funded. And so we know it can at least do what it is supposed to do, which should give at least some preliminary suggestions that it is worthwhile to use it.
Thank you, Dirk. Let's just move on to the next question, because we have quite a few. I suspect a lot of them will be for you, Dirk. Can you discuss the difference between transcranial magnetic stimulation and transcranial ultrasound stimulation? I tried TMS as an off-label treatment for tinnitus. It is FDA approved for the treatment of depression. I got no relief from my tinnitus. Well, I know a lot of trials have been done using TMS for tinnitus. I've seen many papers published with usually kind of mediocre results, I would say. So I'm not surprised it didn't work for this person. But yeah, how would you describe the difference, Dirk?
So the major difference is, of course, the application of different kinds of stimuli. And as the word says, in transcranial magnetic stimulation, you use magnetic waves, which have the benefit that they are completely not inhibited by the skull. So they readily cross the skin and the skull and the dura to hit the brain. But unfortunately, they don't go deep. So they only reach the superficial parts of the brain. And this is in difference to ultrasound. Furthermore, the magnetic stimulation, the waves are not very focalized because they spread out and they reach a large area of the brain. So it's not very focused. Ultrasound, on the other hand, is impeded by the bone, so it needs a little bit more engineering. But can be extremely focal and therefore go a lot deeper, up to 6-7 centimeter deep into the brain, which is close to the midline, basically, in contrast to magnetic stimuli. For magnetic stimulation, as Hazel has mentioned, there have been lots of studies which have even been summarized in what we call meta-analysis, which means that you group all the studies that have been performed, and what they show is that on average you get about 10% reduction in suffering, but unfortunately not in loudness perception. And this 10% suffering improvement is what you see with cognitive behavioral treatment, but also with other stimulation designs like transcranial direct current stimulation. That does not mean that everybody only has 10% benefit. It just means that some people can have a lot of benefit and other people have no benefit whatsoever. And this averages out to about 10% improvement. So from a practical point of view, the difference is the kind of stimuli that are delivered. One magnetic, one ultrasound, one magnetic non-focused, going not deep, and the other one very focused and going very deep.
Yeah. Yeah, so deeper and more targeted. Let's see what else we got in terms of questions. Is the goal of the funded TUS research to find a way to break the tinnitus network as described by Dr. De Ridder in his previous interview with Tinnitus Quest? Or is the research designed with a different model in mind?
That's a very, very good question. Yes, it is. The ultimate goal is to modulate or break the tinnitus network. As tinnitus is a network, you have to dissolve that network at least transiently in order to get a benefit. So yes, it is the goal. It is very rare to have only one target solving an entire problem. That means that it is possible that within this ground with a single target, you might have some benefit, not completely resolution, but that if the researchers continue on using more than one target in their approach, and this is the beauty about the technology, that it can be done, that this might benefit in breaking the network and thereby dissolving the sound.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to always stress that tinnitus is a network problem, and it's not a matter of, there isn't like one point in the brain that we can target, right? And I think that's also why this project is actually trying out different targets, 3 different ones to be precise, to kind of find out which ones are most successful. Let's just pull up the next question. Okay, will this TUS device have to be engineered to deliver the treatment, or does the device already exist? Yeah, so it already exists and they have it at Oxford, right? I think that was one of the reasons that it was also a good project to fund it, because we're not paying for the equipment. The equipment is already there, right? So yeah, I think that answers it, unless I'm somehow wrong about this, Dirk. Oh yeah, okay. So this follows up on what we were talking about earlier, that they're trying out different brain regions, and yeah. So the 3 brain regions they're targeting, why were these targets selected, and kind of, how do we know that these are the right targets?
So the reason why these areas have will be targeted is because they have been targeted basically by implants. So the problem with an implant, of course, is that you cannot apply it to everybody, and that the implants also do not work in every single person, as we've mentioned before. So the problem there is that you can, but it has never been done, that you put implants in all 3 targets that will now be explored non-surgically, being the thalamus, the caudate, and the accumbens. That gives the benefit that if you would be a responder to one of the 3 targets, that will be brilliant, but you also you could be a responder only if you have 2 targets active modulated, or if 3 targets are being modulated. So from a practical point of view, this is what's really unique, and you don't have to put in 6 electrodes, because you have 2 sides in the brain, in order to do something similar to what this innovative technique can achieve.
Great, yeah. I just realized that the person who asked about building the device earlier, maybe they were referring to a device that's like market ready, that can be commercialized for patients. So maybe, can you comment on that?
Yes, so the device is not market ready. This is a research device, but it has been used already in people with Parkinson's disease at the same research center, clearly showing that they can modulate other targets in the brain that we know are involved in Parkinson's disease. So from a practical point of view, this is still a research device. So even if the study will show very promising effects, it still requires some time before this device can then be commercialized to be used in clinics that focus on tinnitus research.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Okay, let's move on. Would you fund another project using TUS if you received another application based on this technology, a study stimulating a different region of the brain, for instance? Maybe I'll ask Sven actually to address this one first. I'm curious what you think.
Well, I think I mean, there needs to be a different background to a new application. What we would certainly not do is to fund a second grant that basically has the same scientific basis as the one we're doing now. And I think we should give this project now the time and the funds to progress and see what's coming out of it. I think what's very important to know for our audience is that we not just, accepted the application of the University of Oxford and giving the grant out. We've been actively involved in trying to give feedback on the project, and maybe little things that could be adjusted to increase output out of the background we're having as patients, and giving advice to the University of Oxford. And I think what was very nice to see is that the researchers actually took that feedback, discussed it, and we're including it into the project now. And I think that's something also Hazel can give an insight to. But I think that's very important to know for all our supporters, that we're not just, accepting an idea. We try to positively influence it with the background knowledge we have, our scientific board has, and trying to improve the project from start.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Sven. Yeah, and an example of that is, for instance, the sample size of this project that we felt should be somewhat larger. It was, I think they were going to test on 10 patients, and we increased it to 20. And, in consultation with the researchers, of course, who had to agree to this and check that it fits within the budget and everything. But, we felt that was really important to be able to have more granular results about whom it works for, how different people respond differently. It's always difficult to do with a smaller sample size. That we've seen studies Dirk knows a lot about the deep brain stimulation studies that have been done, and sometimes it's only a couple of people, for understandable reasons, because it's very invasive and probably expensive, etc. But yeah, when you only have a couple of people, it's really hard to tell why maybe one person got massively better and another person didn't respond at all. So yeah, but that's one example of where, we wanted to work with the researchers to improve the project plan before it kicks off. And they were also really responsive to that, and actually expressed a desire also for us to be actively involved in the project, which we're very happy to do. We can have different people advise along the way. And of course, we'll be reporting to the community along the way, which is another thing that typically research funders don't do, and typically doesn't happen in general with academic research. You'll hear about it years later when the paper gets published, but we will be reporting regularly along the way. So that's something we feel very strongly about. Okay, let's see if we have more questions. Can TUS therapy induce structural changes in the brain? By Justin. Oh, Dirk, I don't hear you. Yeah,
Sorry. Yes. Transcranial ultrasound therapy can indeed create lesions even, but that requires a lot higher energy delivery. So ultrasound can actually be used to image the brain. So it's used, everybody will know that ultrasound is used in pregnancy to look at whether the baby is healthy or not. The same way you can use ultrasound to image the brain. You can use it to modulate the brain at different energy levels. And if you increase the energy levels dramatically, you can even make lesions in the brain. And there is commercially available products that are linked to an MRI machine that heat up the brain up to a certain degree. And then you can see if it gives some benefit, for example, in tremor. And then if the tremor stops, then you can further increase the energy delivery to create a lesion. So yes, you can, but not at the energy levels that are used to modulate.
Okay, great. Okay, let's pull up the next question. While ultrasound cannot be heard, is there any risk of this treatment causing damage? What frequency range will the stimulus be in? I recall something about that it does create some kind of sound artifact, right, for the recipient,
Yes.
but it's very mild or something?
Yes, so whenever you activate the system, you can hear a click. but that click is not causing any hearing damage, and you can wear noise cancelling phones to block or to reduce the loudness generated by the activation and inactivation as much as possible. So, which also means that if you want to do a trial, you have to take that into consideration and then create an artificial sound to when you do placebo stimulation or not real stimulation, so that the participant cannot know whether he or she was getting real or not real stimulation.
Yep.
But the sound levels that are generated are not sufficiently high to generate more lasting damages. Of course, for people with extreme hyperacusis, they would probably not be the ideal candidates in the first instance until it has been checked and detail how good noise cancelling phones can block the sound generation of the device.
Yeah, makes sense to be careful with that group. Other than that, I don't think there were real exclusions, but okay, maybe we'll get a question on that. Would this be a permanent implant, a one-time treatment, an ongoing treatment, or another method of delivery? Right. So it's not an implant because it's not invasive, but maybe you can say a bit more about the delivery.
Yes, so similar to what we do in a neuromodulation clinic with electrical and magnetic stimulation, it is unlikely that, and actually very beneficial, that it is not a one-time treatment. Because if you have a one-time treatment and it's beneficial, that's brilliant. But if you have a one-time treatment that causes a side effect and that side effect stays, that's catastrophic. So what you want, and this is the benefit of all kinds of non-surgical neuromodulation, is that you need to deliver multiple stimulation sessions before the brain gets a longer lasting benefit. So, and this is actually good because it means that even if you would have a side effect, that the side effect will disappear after a short time. But the disadvantage is that you have to do repeated sessions, and theoretically, and this is what we see with electrical and magnetic stimulation, but also with photobiomodulation, is that after a couple of months, people might have to come back for a follow-up session if the efficacy wears off.
Yeah. Yeah, I think these are all things, this is kind of speculation at this point, right? What the long-term effects of this kind of treatment would be. Okay, let's pull up the next question. There's a recent study published this December that proves that near-infrared photobiomodulation can modulate the glutamate receptors in the auditory cortex of the mice brain to directly influence tinnitus GPAIS behavior. This is the test they use to see if animals have tinnitus or not. Do you think a similar phenomenon is applicable in TUS?
That's a very good question. From a practical point of view, when you hear a sound or feel pain or have tremor, like in Parkinson's disease, it is all a balance between glutamate and GABA. Glutamate is the accelerator, like your accelerator in a car, and GABA is the brake. So it's all a balance between the two. So anything that reduces sound generation in the brain or pain in the brain has to have an effect on glutamate and on GABA, blocking glutamate and increasing GABA. So is there a similar phenomenon? It's extremely likely there will be a similar phenomenon, whether it will go via similar receptors or whether it is an indirect effect via modulation of products like dopamine or adrenaline or serotonin that modulate the glutamate is unknown. Or like in photobiomodulation, one of the main effects of photobiomodulation is that it influences also the mitochondria, which are the energy factories in the brain. So there is probably not just one mechanism of action of photobiomodulation, and there is also similarly probably not going to be only one mechanism of action in ultrasound.
Yeah. I think we'll take a few more questions regarding TUS, and then I see there is also a lot of questions on other topics, so we will try to tackle some of those as well. And just a reminder, we will go deeper into the TUS project on 17th January when we also have the principal investigator Robin Cleveland there, so please register for that session. All right, let's see what the next question is. How far in the future can this be applicable if you get good results? Fingers crossed for your outstanding ones. What, in your opinion, are the possible side effects? Sorry, okay, so possible negative side effects. So these are really two different questions, but go ahead, Dirk.
How far in the future can this be applicable? If you get good results, I assume that that you're asking when will this be commercially available. That depends indeed on how good the effects are. For example, if you have only good effects with combining three of the areas, or you might have to add a fourth area, like the parahippocampal area, theoretically, for example, then that might make it more difficult to build a device that can target those areas simultaneously. So that will prolong, just from a technological point of view, the development. But from a practical point of view, realistically speaking, it will not be available, even with good results, within 3 to 5 years. And the reason is not only the technology. Even if the technology is available, you have to get CE and FDA approval for commercial availability of these devices, and that tends to take a long time as well, because these devices have to be, first of all, they have to be safe, and they have to produce what they produce, which is normal, and that can be looked at in short-term research, but they have to be safe in the long term as well. And this requires safety testing. This on top of the safety testing that's essential to do the trial, but also that they don't break down after a while and cause side effects. So the second question then is, what about side effects? That also is determined predominantly by the target. So if you're going to target the caudate, or if you're going to target the accumbens, you're going to have different potential side effects than if you target the thalamus. So it really is determined predominantly by which area you're going to focus on.
Yeah, makes sense. I want to follow up a little bit on that commercial availability topic, and maybe Sven can also say a few words about this, because I think it's important to realize, and people often believe or hope that, when we find something, okay, then I can use it next year or whatever. Unfortunately, that's not the case. There's quite a long process in between discovering something, which was what we're trying to do, is discover something new that could really work, that could be a better solution to help people with tinnitus. But once you find that, there's still a years-long process to get something to market, and it requires a lot of investment that we won't be doing. Venture capitalists maybe, or other people will be doing. But Sven, do you want to say a few more words about that? Because I think it's really important for people to understand and avoid them getting their hopes up too much as well.
Yeah, well, there's no easy answer to that. So there are different ways that could happen. So first of all, just as an example, if we would find an existing drug that is already out in the market, that has not been tested on tinnitus, and somebody would do so and it would work, then there would be actually a quite an easy approach to that. So that would be directly having an impact on treating people. So since that's not the case until today, we focus on different kind of treatments that mostly involve today some technological devices, so such as the ultrasound or whatever it is. So, and as Dirk already mentioned, that has to go to, for the US, for example, for FDA approval, and that includes a lot of testing, a lot of rigorous safety process testing, and so on. So this takes some time, but I think that's very important. The standards to approvals of technical devices in medicine are quite different around the globe. So it could be the case that in some countries that's a little quicker, also in the European Union, depends on the device, and could be a little more rigorous somewhere else. So there's no easy answer to that. And then, of course, if it's a market-ready product, then if it's an absolutely new product, especially if it's a home device, then of course we talk about a major investment. In the case of ultrasound, I hope I get it 100% correct, but Dirk, please correct me. We're talking about an existing technology that's used at the moment. So I think this kind of treatment, at least today, would, in case that it's successful, first of all, we would see more trials, not just this one trial that we're funding. There will be different trials around the world, probably also investigating, are there other areas of stimulation that could be interesting? Are there more interesting patterns that this device can attack? And then if that's happening, then if there is standard therapy protocol would come out of it, it would be probably happening at certified centers around the world that would do this treatment.
Yeah, and I feel like it's important maybe to also address, because I'm not sure if anyone has asked this question, but I will ask it. There is a possibility that we won't get good results from this study, right? And why is it then still worthwhile, right? Can we still, how do we make sure we can still learn, get something valuable for the community and make progress, even if that happens?
Yeah, so we have done 15 years of different trials trying to modulate the brain in different ways. Also understanding what does not work is very important because it can guide further research. For example, some of the applications were using magnetic stimuli of transcranial magnetic stimulation of targets that had already been done, just modifying a little bit the stimulation design. This is not fundamentally going to create a major breakthrough. So understanding whether ultrasound has the capacity to modulate those brain areas is very important because they cannot be reached. Will it, if, let's say, nothing comes out of the trial, then we will know, well, these areas individually are not relevant or they are not important enough in the network to break the network. If we get no beneficial effect from sequentially targeting those areas, then we know, okay, well, this does not work, but maybe it might work if we target them simultaneously, which will have to be then trialed in a different way. So I know this might sound frustrating, but better understanding how these three areas that are only the preliminary areas, there's more deeper structures in the brain that are involved in the generation of tinnitus, how and they are involved is of fundamental relevance, because up to now we only know about the cortical areas and from very small numbered deep brain implants. So we will learn a lot even if the trial is negative, and this is very important. It is a little bit the approach that we see in other technologies where you learn from failure, and that failure then allows you to look for solutions why you failed on the condition that you understand why you failed, and not say, well, it doesn't work, that's it. No, then you have to first try and understand why did it not work, and this can then generate a new hypothesis that can then lead hopefully to a more beneficial approach.
Yeah, exactly. And I know, Dirk, you've been a strong advocate also for publishing negative results, which unfortunately often doesn't happen. And that's a problem because then you can't learn from it. Sven, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would like to add in general that kind of motivating our audience that research is all about failing. So it is. So what our goal with Tinnitus Quest is for the next year, one of our goals is that we try to define key research questions that have to be answered to make a progress in different areas. And without failing, we will never be able to narrow down those questions. And it's so important that we get used that we support projects and they might fail, but the question is, how do we speak about the failure and how do we discuss the results, and does something kind of come out of it to narrow down those research questions? So I know it's frustrating for a lot of people, especially in this condition, but all the big breakthroughs in other areas that we know, such as HIV or cancer or whatever it is, are basically on the basis that things have been tried and they narrowed down the key research questions, and this has been answered then in the end through research. So that is something that even though I understand it's frustrating, it shouldn't be. It's a normal process. It's the normal process of rigorous research and the quality of research that we will fail on a project, even Tinnitus Quest supports. So that is a normal process.
Yeah, so if I may add, Hazel, to what Sven is just saying, I think the goal of Tinnitus Quest is not to, as Sven said, not to fail, but probably to try and fail better. And by failing better, I mean that we can extract as much information as possible from the new approaches. And that's what I mentioned when you say, okay, well, we try at a known target with magnetic stimulation, which has already been studied in 100 trials, and we just change something about the stimulation design. That's not failing better. That is just failing without real knowledge of how to move forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. Having seen so many of those trial results where I just kind of got more and more frustrated. Like, why are we not learning from the result? We just keep trying different things without learning from the existing results. But okay, we are kind of getting close to the official cutoff time. I just want to check, Dirk, do you have a hard cutoff, or can you stay a bit longer?
Yeah, but not a lot longer, because
okay, not a lot longer. We'll keep that in mind. All right. Then probably Sven and I will stay a bit longer to try and answer more questions, even though we may not be able to answer the most scientific ones. Have 20 tinnitus patients been selected for this study? Yes, but they haven't been selected, but the number will be 20. If not, how do I find out about applying to participate? Yeah, I don't know much about that yet. So, I mean, the study will be in Oxford, so I assume you kind of have to be in that area so that you can frequently visit without, moving moving to the UK. But yeah, they have to actually go through the ethical approval process first. That's always a requirement for this kind of study. That takes a few months, unfortunately. There's a committee at the university that has to approve the study, and then they can start recruiting patients. So I don't know too much about how that will happen. Maybe, Dirk, you can say a few words in general about clinical trial recruitment.
Yeah, so in clinical trials, recruitment can be done in two major ways. One is by if the research is run through Oxford, and that they have an agreement with the ENT, neurology, psychiatry departments to send potential participants, or other trials are completely open, where people can apply from to just participate. Then you get what's called exclusion and inclusion criteria, and what meaning that you have to, of course, you have to have tinnitus, but then sometimes the tinnitus is specified to be, for example, pure tone, sometimes without hearing loss, sometimes with or without hyperacusis. So these are the inclusion criteria. And then there's also exclusion criteria, meaning criteria that determine that you might not be suited. For example, if you've had previous brain surgery, so that the skull is not completely closed, that some part is more prone for the ultrasound waves to go through. So sometimes epilepsy is an exclusion criteria. So these determine who can participate. But sometimes there is also very practical reasons, such as the ones mentioned by Hazel. If you live in Australia and you have to be involved in a study that lasts for a month, well, it's clearly not as easy than if you live very close to the center where the research is being performed.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll tackle some questions that are not directly TUS related, but more general. And I asked Marco to pull up any ones that are specifically for Dirk first, so that Dirk, you can leave in 10, 15 minutes or so. Sound Pharmaceuticals has successfully completed FDA phase 3 on their drug SBI 1005 for Menière. The FDA's granted breakthrough therapy status. Do you believe that Tinnitus Quest should do a pilot study to see if this can help tinnitus? All right, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'm going to let Dirk speak first.
It's not, well, if it's not because something works on Meniere's disease or has a beneficial effect on Meniere's disease, which is that it will have an effect on tinnitus. And in Meniere's disease, people can have tinnitus, often two different types. One, which is a low frequency, low sound that comes up and goes with the attacks or the bouts or the paroxysms. And then sometimes in the longer stage, when there is more hearing loss, it can be accompanied by a more constant sound. But it's a very specific kind of tinnitus. So from a practical point of view, to automatically generalize that it will be beneficial for tinnitus is not the case. So from this point of view, it doesn't mean that one should try different approaches, but there is one should not have false hope that because it works in Meniere's, that will also work for tinnitus in general.
Yeah, I agree, Dirk. And I actually saw the presentation from the CEO of Sound Pharma at the ARO conference last February, so less than a year ago. And this was the trial that was done indeed on Meniere's patients, and the results for Meniere's reduction of Meniere's symptoms were really, really good. But they did also test results for the tinnitus outcomes for those that also, many of them also have tinnitus, of course. And those results were really, really poor. Now, of course, this wasn't a trial that was designed for tinnitus. And when I spoke privately to the CEO, and he said I could mention this, by the way, he said they do want to do a trial specifically for tinnitus, and he believes that then the results might be better. But I think I agree it's important not to get your hopes up, because the results for tinnitus were actually poor in the Meniere's trial. Okay, let's move on so that we can tackle more questions. Dr. Tsinopoulos, yes, we know him. He's part of Tinnitus Quest's innovation board. Believes that xenon farm drug azetukalner, okay, I have to admit I've never heard of this, may help tinnitus because it is a Kv7 potassium channel opener, has passed phase 3 testing. Do you feel Tinnitus Quest should do a pilot study for tinnitus? What do you think, Dirk?
It is true that there is not a lot of drugs that work on potassium channels. We've trialed, even though they're not unpublished. And many tinnitus clinics prescribe sodium blockers, calcium blockers, so all ion channels that can be blocked. But there is very few that have tested potassium channels. There was retirabine, but that which was working on the potassium channels. The problem with that is that it had so many side effects that it is now not allowed anymore within the European community. It's still available in some countries, but so from this point of view, you have to consider that if you trial something for tinnitus, that it might have to be taken in the long run, which means that it has to be safe in the long run and not be associated with a lot of side effects, because otherwise you're going to change one problem, being the tinnitus, into another problem, meaning the side effects of the medication. And also you want to be sure that it's safe in the long run. And we know of many medications that have been taken for longer times that can then cause more or many disturbing side effects in the long run, whether it's kidney failure or liver problems or whatever. And this is important. If you do not have a drug that stops the tinnitus after, let's say, a week, then you have to make sure that the medication is safe in the long run.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what Dr. Tsinopoulos was working on for a number of years, and I'm not sure where that stands at the moment, but trying to reformulate reticabine in a way that it's safer to use, but still effective for tinnitus. So maybe we can probably get Dr. Tsinopoulos on at some point to talk about that. Okay, Dirk, we'll do maybe one or two more questions for you, and we'll let you go if you need to go. I know Sven has a lot of opinions on this one too. What do you think of Lenire therapy, which I have used and didn't get much improvement? And I will say anecdotally, I've heard this from a lot of people. I know anecdotes aren't data, but still. So I'll ask Dirk first and then Sven.
Yeah. So if you look at the literature, so Lenire's treatment combines electrical stimuli of the tongue with a specific sound delivery. So you have a combination of electrical stimulation with sound stimulation. And this is called bimodal stimulation. And it's similar to what Susan Shore has developed for the C2, so stimulation in the neck. We've just finished a trial with vagus stimulation and sound treatment. And the problem with all these trials is that in general, they seem to reduce the suffering, but not the loudness. So, and of course, recording loudness is, or reducing the suffering, it can be relatively non-specific in the sense that if you combine sound plus electrical stimuli, there is also multiple parameters that have to be taken into account. If you look at Lenire, they have done large studies that do show an improvement in suffering, but unfortunately not in loudness.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I've heard that anecdotally from a lot of people. And I will also say that personally, I have a problem with the way Lenire has been marketed, because they talked about, I think, like 86% of people getting improvement. But then if you look at the actual study, it means 86% of people getting a 1-point reduction on a 100-point scale, which, like, that's not really improvement. That's just noise. But Sven, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think, bimodal stimulation is something that has a, let's say, at least scientific potential to be researched and see what it can do. And I think a big mistake has been done to market a product on the basis of research that has not been, let's say, investigated intensely enough. And then if such a product comes to market, then marketing comes into play, as you just said. And I think from how it was marketed, it gave a lot of hope to many patients. And then what happened was basically exactly what Dirk mentioned. And I think this is a reminder that we have to be very, very careful with how we market those kind of products, especially in a condition like tinnitus, where so much hope is always on one single project that seems promising. I know this is also frustrating, but it's something that is very important, and I think it has, let's say, Lenire made it very, very hard for bimodal stimulation in the future to be accepted by patients, or that they have some kind of justified belief that this will be working somehow. So I think that's the summary of what I think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's quickly move on so we can have maybe Dirk answer one or two more questions. Sven, I think there's a lot of background noise on your end. If you could just mute yourself. Or maybe it's not you, it's someone. How critical to identifying effective treatments do you think it is to better distinguish among types or even causes of tinnitus? Yeah, this is the classic subtyping question. And we had all discussion at the Tinnitus Hackathon whether subtypes matter or not. Maybe you can summarize the debate a little bit, Dirk.
Yes, so the problem with subtyping is that we don't know whether there are subtypes, like we know in pain. And in pain, we know subtypes, and they are clinically very relevant. For example, if you have trigeminal neuralgia, you will have different treatment options than if you have cluster headache or if you have migraine headache. So in pain, we know that if you give medications for one pain type to another pain type, it doesn't work. But if you're correct, then the chances of success are higher. The problem with tinnitus is we have not reliably found subtypes that matter. And you can do cluster analysis and use AI to look for different subtypes, but they clinically do not seem to matter up to now. For example, there is in large subdivisions whether people have tinnitus without or with hearing loss, whether they have somatosensory modulated tinnitus, etc. But if you know that 70 to 75% of people can modulate their tinnitus by somatosensory movements, then the question is this still a subtype or is this just the norm? And if it doesn't seem to matter all that much for the treatment approach, then the subtyping is nice to have, but it doesn't add any benefit to the clinical realm. So the major problem we have, in contrast to pain, is that there is no generally accepted subtyping yet. Ideally, it will be developed, and there is further trials to look, or maybe there is no subtypes, and all the tinnitus do follow a final common pathway that we can try to attack, which might be easier, but it's of course quicker to have a success if there is clearly demarcated subtypes.
Yeah, at the hackathon, I think we did a quick poll by raise of hands. Do you believe, how many believe in a common pathway, common central pathway, or in a meaningfully different ways that tinnitus can be generated? And it was about 50-50, maybe not super representative since we were 20-something people. Maybe we should do a survey among hundreds of researchers to see what they think. Could be interesting. Anyway, Dirk, I want to thank you so much for being here. We're going to let you go now. And you can just close the tab and get on with your evening. But thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome.
All right. Then we'll try to see if the rest of us can manage to answer more questions, even though we don't have Dirk's amazing scientific insights. Dr. Will Sedley released some positive research in the UK. Will he be speaking about this on the 17th? I would say you should ask him about it on the 17th. I mean, he's there and ready to answer any questions. I know this research got a lot of media attention in the UK. Personally, I haven't really had the chance to read up much about it. I will do that before the Q&A. Will I be able to get a recording and transcript? Yes, since you're registered for the event, you can go back to the same link that you got to watch this event. You can use that to watch the replay. But we will also be editing the recording to kind of clean up the audio and add nice subtitles and things like that. So that usually takes a couple of weeks, and then we'll publish the final nicely edited version also on the website. Isn't loudness the most significant impact of tinnitus? Quality of life would seem to be nothing more than the placebo effects. Sven, do you have thoughts on this? And you're muted, so you have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the question. That's a very, very good question. Especially is quality of life a placebo effect? Well, first of all, the placebo effect is an effect. So it is something that is very, very strong, and also placebo effect can be quite lasting. Yes, in general, I would say that the majority of patients that we know, that we speak to, that listen to this Q&A, would say that loudness of the tinnitus is the number one, let's say, thing that they would want to be changed to feel better. I think there's a second one, which is pitch. I think that in general, a lower pitch is better tolerated than a high pitch. So those are the two main things that I think tinnitus patients would look at.
Yeah, 100% agree. And this is something, we've been advocating from the beginning, that it really should be about, new research should be about reducing loudness. I do see some comments that your audio is a bit low, Sven. Yeah, we were aware of that before we started the event, but we couldn't fix it. We will fix it in the final published version of the event, so apologies about that. Is AI playing a part in tinnitus research? If so, in what areas? And could the use of AI lead to an unexpected breakthrough?
Well, a lot of regions, but what we are, I think, working on, what we want as Tinnitus Quest to be working on is data management with it. So I think we will speak about that in the near future, that Tinnitus Quest has an idea to how to set up a data bank, which is quite tough, to and have AI tools to analyze that and see what can come out of it, because with AI you can do the size of meta-analysis you can do with it, or in general the size and pattern finding amongst huge amounts of data is something that AI is mainly also created to. So I think data analysis is something that is very, very important, where this will happen, and I think also in other fields, but it will very much depend on the project. So, but AI will, not just in tinnitus research, will become a major factor in research in general. So I think we will see many, many more projects on that in the future.
Yeah. And one thing we've also realized is that we might, for a next round of grant applications, we might have to also push people a bit more in certain directions that we believe are viable, rather than just leaving it completely open. So it could be, I'm not saying it will happen, but it could be, for instance, that we have people can apply specifically for a grant that applies AI techniques to analyze tinnitus data, for instance. Okay, I think we don't have that many questions left. Okay. For now, is there a best treatment for tinnitus? And what is it? Well, we've all tried so much. Well, actually, I have to say, personally, I haven't tried that many things, because I felt from the beginning it's probably useless to try all those different things. But I've spoken to so many people who've tried a million different things and didn't find anything that really worked. Usually what works best is, just finding your own way to kind of manage your lifestyle, right? Find the best way to manage your diet and exercise and reduce stress and all of these things. I mean, that's in my opinion, probably the best you can do, as imperfect as it can be. But that said, there are probably certain treatments that have worked very well for, a small subset of people, right? Dirk was talking earlier about those transcranial magnetic stimulation trials that overall have been a failure, but maybe 1 or 2 people got like really good benefits from it. But that's the problem, is that there's nothing that generally works for a lot of people. Sven and Jack, do you want to talk? Well, let's start with Sven, but Jack, I also want to hear like what you've tried and what your experience is with that.
Oh yeah, very easy.
Hi, folks.
Oh, sorry.
I've not tried.
Okay, let Jack go first. You go first, Jack. It's fine. Yeah.
Sorry, Sven, did I interrupt you?
Yeah.
I got it on low. I've not tried anything other than my own sort of patterns and my own techniques. As you mentioned, reducing stress, exercise. I'm a big believer in trying to rethink your situation, because you can rethink it in 2 ways. You can go down the rabbit hole of depression, which I've been down, or you can try and pull yourself out. I have quite loud tinnitus, so I've had to deal with it in my own way. I've made videos about it. And I think that if you can try and balance exercise, stress, and also rethinking it, you can pull yourself from under the cloud, which is very, very important, because you can get lost there. So yeah, that's the best thing that I've found so far.
Yeah. Sven, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very, very hard question to answer. It's in the end, it's as you said, Hazel. For now, everybody has to find their own ways how to manage their situations, and there's nothing wrong in the world with any kind of relaxing techniques. Everything that gives you a good time. I would say in general, whatever that is something that helps you. I think what an important message is for everybody who just got tinnitus, or is let's say in the beginning of their chronic tinnitus, is over time you will adjust to it way better than you would ever think today. Of course, there is a percentage of patients that will not do, but the majority of patients find their way to manage it and live a fulfilling life, even though you can imagine that in that situation now. And everybody who's on this panel here has gone through this process. And sometimes you will have to readjust over time, but you will do. And I think that is the answer I can give to that.
Yeah. Though it's important to give hope in that sense. And yeah, we've all been through it. I would say I'm pretty well habituated. I'm doing this, I would say, more for other people than for myself at this point, because like Sven said, because I've talked to hundreds, if not like thousands, of tinnitus sufferers over the years, also through the Tinnitus Talk forum, and and there's people for whom it's so overbearing and so complex, and maybe they also have hyperacusis, and they also have other issues going on in their life, and it just becomes impossible to manage. And I think it's really for those people that we believe very strongly that better solutions are needed, and that's why we had to do this. Although, of course, when the cure becomes available, we'll all be taking it as well. I mean, I'm sure. But I think, generally speaking, we're doing this mostly for the severe chronic sufferers who really feel debilitated, right? Jack, have you tried any treatments apart from just like the lifestyle stuff? Because I know Sven has tried Lenire and it didn't do anything. But
No, I've not tried them, and just because I didn't feel like they were where I wanted them to be, and that's why I was motivated to become part of Tinnitus Quest, and also to make videos, because I didn't feel that there was anything out there, and the knowledge of that can, like I said, it can really get you lost under that cloud. So I felt very strongly about expressing some sort of methods in my my techniques and my videos, because I think that it's important, like you say, Hazel, to also, as we progress with Tinnitus Quest, to also give some sense of hope, because hope is really powerful. Hope in two terms: belief in what we're doing as Tinnitus Quest, but also hope in terms of people helping themselves cope day to day as we try and find solutions. So no, I've not tried anything, but I have found my ways of dealing with it. Sven mentioned that you have to adjust it. This is a very, very important point, because a lot of people, I find, and myself included, they get to a certain point, they're okay with it, and then all of a sudden something happens. Stress, noise, induced, whatever.
I've heard that so often, Jack. Yeah.
And that's the point where people, I think, really struggle, including myself, because you say, okay, I worked this hard to get to this point. I'm okay. I've been okay for six months, 6 years, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden something happens. And then you think, well, I don't have the strength to recalibrate like I did the first time. So it's really important. And this is something that we discussed at the beginning, is that we've got to transmit hope, because hope is something that is really, I think, lacking in the tinnitus community, and something that I feel great every time we release a video, every time we release an interview, every time we do Q&As like this. I feel great, because I feel like it's adding just a little bit of drop of hope into the glass. And if we can capitalize on that, as we've said many times, the numbers that we're talking about are astounding. We're talking between 700 to 1 billion people. If we can keep dropping droplets of hope into the glass, what we can achieve is incredible. And it's big picture stuff, but that's the way my mind works. So hope is important. And this is why Q&As like this, videos, etc., the Tinnitus Quest as a whole, that's why it's important.
Yeah, 100%, Jack. And I think the work you've been doing with interviewing artists, but also just regular people who are struggling with tinnitus or have had their own journeys with tinnitus has been so impactful. And it's so important that people speak out and we hear all these stories that we, helps to raise more awareness, it helps to raise more funding, and like you said, generates a lot of hope. Maybe we should do a Q&A just more on the awareness aspects. We've covered research topics extensively. Maybe Jack, you and a few others, we should do one just about like the awareness aspects and that. But anyway, I think this is our final question, or maybe it's not really a question, but it's a very nice comment. God bless Tinnitus Quest. It's unbelievable that such a widespread chronic illness has not received serious and concerted efforts from not only the private sector, but more significantly in the pharmaceutical industry. 100% agree, Alan, and thank you for that comment. We hear very often, right, Sven? Why is the pharma industry not investing, right? And it is a problem. They're only going to invest when we kind of give them the solution on a platter. That's basically the answer, right? So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, well, the first and very easy answer to that is that we have to find a measurement system for whatever, however it looks like in the end, is to be able to measure tinnitus and to actually link this measurement to the severity of the condition. Because it's very hard to develop a drug or whatever it is in the world that where the outcome is basically always just a question to the patient, are you feeling better, or is the noise reduced, or whatever it is. And we all know that tinnitus has one big challenge, is the enormous influence of the placebo effect on almost all trials we see. So this is something that a couple of centers are working on around the world to find an objective measure of tinnitus, and I think that is one big thing about that. But I think to all of the audience and supporters, we as Tinnitus Quest, we're just at the beginning of what we want to do, and I think I totally understand that a lot of people always mention, why isn't the government involved? Why is this widespread chronic illness not seen as a major problem? Because we until today we haven't made enough progress in advocating for it, and all other diseases we know that have done that quite successfully are, for example, mental health issues. I mean, depression 20 years ago was an absolute taboo topic, and it was, it was dealt with under the table, and nobody was openly speaking about it. Well, of course, then people started advocating for it, and this also links to our media strategy that Jack is working on day and night, is to get people to openly speak about this problem, and this is what we're working on, and then of course we will take the next step at a point to actively influence policymakers in Europe and the US primarily to address that. And I think this is a journey. But I think we had a quite successful start to this journey, and everybody on the team is 100% dedicated to finding a solution. And whatever buttons we have to press, we will definitely press them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I do still see some questions trickling in, like Maurice commented, Pharma will invest once billions can be made. Absolutely true. But I think, yeah, there we go. It's 100% true. But that's why I said once we kind of hand them the solution on a platter, then they will invest. But at the moment, it's considered a risky area to invest in, unfortunately. Too risky for Pharma. A nice one popped in. Thank you so much for your efforts, from Elisa. I really appreciate it as a long-time sufferer who's not been able to habituate due to tinnitus and hyperacusis. That changes from day to day. Yeah, I think that last bit is also so important. I'm very lucky that my tinnitus is very constant, but I often talk to people who are struggling so much because it's changing all the time. And then, of course, the hyperacusis added. Yeah, I can only imagine. But thank you so much for your kind words. There's a lot of questions we didn't get to. I think the ones we skipped, a lot of them were regarding different treatments, like should I try physiotherapy for tinnitus? Should I try notched audio therapy? Should I try this or that? I think we kind of skipped those because it's a little bit out of the scope of today's session. I would definitely encourage you to go back and watch a lot of our previous Q&As where we did address a lot of topics regarding existing treatments and what you can try. So the one with Dirk was really good, the one with Bertolt, the one with Hamid, and maybe we'll do another Q&A later this year specifically on existing treatments and what you can try and what you should stay away from, because there's definitely things you should absolutely stay away from as well. A lot of scams, unfortunately. Okay, let's close off with a nice comment from Paul. Thank you for all the work you're doing on this. I will stay engaged with your work. I am registered blind and hearing was my primary sense, so hearing loss along with tinnitus coming in my early 50s was devastating, but time has helped me adjust and I live in hope. Thank you, Paul. And I can only imagine how awful the hearing issues must be when you already have lost your vision. So our sympathies on that. And thank you very much for your kind comment. And on that note, I will thank Sven and Jack for being here with me today. And thank you everyone for attending and asking such thoughtful questions. And we hope to see you back on the 17th of January. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.